most of my time is just to get up in the morning.
Andy Warhol was one of the most famous artists of the 20th century, known for turning everyday objects like soup cans into masterpieces and for shocking the world with bold ideas that mixed art, fame, and celebrity culture. But near the end of his life, he created something far more personal and secretive. Warhol's assistants discovered a final sketchbook that contained many drawings, but one page stood out so much that they decided to cover it completely with black ink. This was not just another pop art experiment. It wasn't a portrait of Marilyn Monroe or a Brillo box. According to those who saw it, the page revealed the deepest fear Andy carried with him his entire life: the fear of hospitals. For decades, fans and historians wondered what exactly was on that hidden page. What did Andy draw that was so shocking? To understand the answer, we need to look at the journey of his life, the struggles that shaped him, and the pain that never truly left him. Andy Warhol was born Andrew Warhol on August 6, 1928, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His parents had come to America from Slovakia, escaping poverty and looking for a better life. But life in Pittsburgh was not much easier. The Warhol family lived in small apartments, moving from one poor neighborhood to another, often struggling to pay rent and buy food. His father, Andre, worked long hours in dangerous jobs like mining and construction. Every night he came home covered in dirt, exhausted, but still trying to smile for his children. Andy grew up wearing hand-me-down clothes from his older brothers, Paul and John, and his mother, Julia, worked tirelessly sewing, cleaning, and praying to keep the family together. But in 1936, when Andy was just 8 years old, tragedy struck. He became sick with a condition called Sydenham's chorea, which caused his body to shake uncontrollably. He had to stay in bed for weeks, too weak to play or go to school. His pale skin and thin hair made him stand out, and when he returned to class, other children bullied him. They called him names and pushed him around for looking different. Yet during those long hours in bed, something important happened. His mother brought him magazines filled with pictures of movie stars like Greta Garbo and Shirley Temple. Andy began to cut out their faces, draw them, and make collages. That small kitchen table became his first art studio, and illness turned into the start of a lifelong obsession with images, fame, and beauty. The sickness Andy suffered as a child left scars that were more than physical. He felt different, weaker, and less confident than the children around him. His voice was soft, his nose slightly off-center, and his skin pale. Bullies often targeted him, and he carried those memories for the rest of his life. Things became even harder when, in May 1942, Andy's father died. Andre Warhol had been working in West Virginia, where he accidentally drank contaminated water. His body, already weak from an earlier surgery, couldn't fight off the infection, and he died of tuberculosis peritonitis. Andy was only 13. The family brought his father's body back to their tiny apartment and followed their religious tradition, keeping the coffin in their living room for 3 days. Young Andy was so frightened that he hid, unable to even look at his father's face. That moment left him with a fear of sickness, hospitals, and death that would stay with him forever. To support the family, Andy and his brother Paul went door to door selling fruits and vegetables. Andy also earned a few pennies by sketching portraits of neighbors on the street. Since they couldn't afford real art lessons, Andy ordered mail-in courses and practiced at home. Though he was fragile, he turned to art as his shield against the world. The drawings, collages, and later photography gave him control, a way to escape the things that scared him most. This fear of sickness, loss, and being different would one day resurface in his art and in the pages of that final sketchbook. Andy's high school years were not easy, but he managed to push through. At Schenley High School in Pittsburgh, he graduated in 1945 at just 16 years old. His classmates often thought he was strange, but his artistic skills made him stand out. Unlike other students who sketched flowers and landscapes, Andy drew soup cans, toothpaste tubes, and everyday objects. He didn't want to show the beauty of nature. He wanted to show the things people consumed every day. After high school, he enrolled in the Carnegie Institute of Technology, where he studied commercial design. Though his shaky hands from childhood illness made painting difficult, Andy pushed forward. Some professors doubted him, but he found support from a few teachers, especially Robert Lepper, who encouraged him to see everyday objects as art. By 1949, Andy graduated with a degree in fine arts and moved to New York City with just $200 in his pocket. He dropped the A from his last name and became Andy Warhol, ready to reinvent himself. On his second day in New York, he boldly walked into Glamour magazine and landed his first job drawing shoes for an advertisement. From that moment, his career began. What started as commercial illustration would soon explode into pop art that shook the world. In 1961, Andy painted 32 canvases of Campbell's soup cans, each showing a different flavor. This was his breakthrough. Some critics dismissed it as a joke, while others recognized it as a bold new form of art that reflected the consumer culture of America. Warhol wasn't painting kings and queens. He was painting the food people ate every day. He turned mass production into high art. Around the same time, he also painted celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, turning them into icons that blended fame with religion-like imagery. His Marilyn diptych, created just weeks after Monroe's death in 1962, shocked the world with its mix of bright colors and fading black and white images. To many, it felt like a tribute and a critique of how fame consumes lives. Warhol's studio, known as The Factory, became a gathering place for artists, musicians, and outsiders. Covered in silver foil, it was both a creative machine and a wild party space. But not everything in Warhol's life was glamorous. In 1968, a woman named Valerie Solanas shot him at the factory, nearly killing him. Though doctors saved his life after hours of surgery, the event left him with lasting scars, both physical and emotional. From that day forward, he became more fearful, private, and cautious. His deep fear of hospitals only grew stronger, making the blacked-out page in his sketchbook even more haunting. As the years went by, Warhol continued to shock people with his art. He created series about death and disaster, using images of car crashes, electric chairs, and suicides. Critics accused him of making money from tragedy, but Warhol argued that he was only showing what the media already showed. In the 1970s, he went even further with his piss paintings, where he and his assistants urinated on copper-covered canvases to create chemical reactions. Many galleries refused to display them, but Warhol didn't care. He also created graphic works exploring sexuality, which scandalized audiences even more. Beneath the shocking images, though, was a man who felt deeply insecure. He hated his scars from the shooting, disliked his thinning hair, and was never satisfied with how he looked. He wore wigs, makeup, and often avoided mirrors. His art reflected this discomfort, especially his haunting self-portraits known as the Frightwig series. To outsiders, he was bold and eccentric, but inside he remained the fragile boy from Pittsburgh who feared hospitals, sickness, and death. The final sketchbook page, covered in ink, seemed to capture that hidden truth. Though Andy rarely spoke about his personal relationships, he did have partners who meant a lot to him. For many years, he lived with Jed Johnson, an interior designer. Later, he met John Gould, a young executive at Paramount Pictures. Their relationship lasted several years, but it was filled with fear because of the growing AIDS crisis in the 1980s. Warhol became increasingly paranoid, insisting that Gould's dishes and laundry be kept separate. When Gould eventually died of AIDS in 1986 at only 33 years old, Warhol was devastated. He could barely write about it in his diary, leaving only broken sentences and scribbles. By then, Warhol himself was also suffering. His health was fragile, and he continued to wear a surgical corset after the shooting years earlier. The fear that had haunted him since childhood now weighed heavier than ever. Just months later, in February 1987, Andy Warhol entered a New York hospital for what was supposed to be a routine gallbladder surgery. He was afraid, but doctors reassured him. Tragically, his heart gave out after the procedure, and he died at the age of 58. Many close to him believed his fear of hospitals was justified, and that fear was perhaps exactly what he captured in the sketchbook page that was blacked out. The mystery of Andy Warhol's final sketchbook remains one of the most haunting parts of his story. What exactly did he draw? Was it an image of his father's coffin from when he was a child? Was it a hospital bed, a scar, or something even darker? His assistants may have covered it in black ink to protect his reputation, or perhaps because it was too painful for the world to see. Whatever it was, the page reveals a truth that went beyond soup cans and celebrity portraits. Warhol was not just an artist of pop culture. He was a man shaped by fear, loss, and sickness. He turned those private pains into public art, transforming insecurity into power. Yet in his last days, when he held a sketchbook in his hands, he didn't draw Marilyn or Elvis. He drew the one thing he feared most. That final blacked-out page remains hidden, but it reminds us that behind the wigs, the fame, and the shocking art, Andy Warhol was still the boy from Pittsburgh, fragile, vulnerable, and forever afraid of the hospital room where his story would finally end. As the 1960s rolled on, Andy Warhol wasn't just making art, he was changing the very definition of it. His studio, famously called The Factory, was more than just a workspace. It was a cultural hub where artists, musicians, actors, and free spirits came together. The silver walls, constant parties, and atmosphere of experimentation made it feel like another world. Warhol wasn't only painting soup cans and celebrities anymore. He was producing films, experimenting with photography, and even designing album covers for bands like the Velvet Underground. Yet behind this explosion of creativity, Warhol himself remained strangely distant. He often acted more like a director than an artist, letting his assistants help create his works while he observed from the shadows. This made many critics question, was Warhol a genius or simply someone using others to build his empire? Still, he thrived in the attention, even if it came with doubt and criticism. The more people tried to understand him, the more he seemed to hide, keeping his true self tucked away like the sketchbook page he blacked out. Fame was both Warhol's greatest weapon and his deepest curse. He was surrounded by cameras, admirers, and reporters, but in many ways he remained painfully alone. People close to him often said Andy was like a mirror. He reflected what others wanted to see, but rarely showed his own emotions. He once said, "If you want to know all about Andy Warhol, just look at the surface of my paintings and films. There I am. There's nothing behind it." This quote has puzzled fans for decades. Was he being serious, or was it another layer of irony? Despite the crowds of people at the factory, Andy's personal relationships were complicated. Many of his superstars eventually drifted away, some blaming him for exploiting them, others simply moving on. Warhol watched them go, always calm on the outside, but perhaps carrying more pain than he admitted. The sketchbook with its blacked-out page may have been a silent confession, a place where he allowed his hidden thoughts to exist, even if he didn't want anyone else to see them. The 1970s were not as glamorous for Warhol as the 1960s. After the shooting by Valerie Solanas in 1968, he was never the same physically or emotionally. His confidence seemed shaken, and his art took on a different tone. While he still produced portraits of celebrities, including Mick Jagger, Liza Minnelli, and Muhammad Ali, there was a sense of repetition that some critics mocked. They claimed Warhol had lost his edge, but Andy, ever practical, leaned into commercial success. He painted portraits on commission, turning his art into a business where wealthy clients paid to have their faces immortalized in his colorful style. This helped him remain financially stable, but some of his closest followers noticed he was retreating even further from his old adventurous self. He became more cautious, more focused on money, and more aware of death. It was during this time that he began writing and recording his daily life in detail, almost as if he knew his diary would become part of his legacy. The sketchbook remained a quiet companion, holding the thoughts he didn't dare put into words. Though Andy Warhol is remembered as the king of pop art, one of the most overlooked parts of his life was his deep connection to religion. Raised in a devout Byzantine Catholic family, Andy never completely abandoned his faith. He regularly attended church, often slipping into the back pew unnoticed, and even volunteered at soup kitchens. Religion was not something he flaunted in public, but it was a private anchor for him throughout his chaotic life. He once created a series of works inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, showing that even in his art, his faith quietly spoke through. For Andy, religion was tied to his fears of sickness, death, and the unknown. Having nearly died in the hospital after the 1968 shooting, he carried a lifelong fear of medical places. Even a simple checkup filled him with dread. The irony was heartbreaking. A man surrounded by bright colors, fame, and constant chatter was, in his heart, haunted by silence, shadows, and the thought of his own mortality. In the winter of 1987, Andy Warhol faced the very thing he feared most, going under the surgeon's knife again. What was supposed to be a routine gallbladder operation turned into tragedy. Warhol delayed the procedure for years because of his fear of hospitals, and by the time he agreed, it was almost too late. On February 22, 1987, Warhol died unexpectedly after the surgery. The news shocked the art world. How could a man who seemed untouchable, who built his entire persona on eternal youth and glamour, be gone so suddenly? For many, It was a reminder of how fragile he truly was beneath the surface. When people later revisited his diaries and belongings, the mystery of the blacked-out sketchbook page became even more powerful. Was it a dark secret about his health? A confession about his fears? Or maybe a thought so private that he wanted to erase it from history? No one will ever know for sure. His death turned that hidden page into a haunting symbol of the parts of Andy Warhol the world never got to see. After his death, Andy Warhol's possessions became treasures of curiosity. Among them, his sketchbooks drew particular attention. They were filled with drawings, doodles, and notes, some silly, some profound. But the most puzzling part remained that one page completely blacked out. Art experts and fans debated endlessly about its meaning. Some believed it contained a self-portrait too painful for him to share. Others thought it was a personal diary entry, perhaps connected to his fear of hospitals or his struggles with identity. Still, others saw it as Warhol's final performance art, erasing something so people would forever speculate about it. In a way, it was the perfect Warhol gesture. He thrived on mystery, on blurring the lines between truth and illusion. By leaving that page hidden, he ensured that the conversation about him would never end. Just as his paintings turned everyday objects into eternal symbols, that black page turned silence into one of his most powerful statements. Today, Andy Warhol's influence is everywhere, from galleries and fashion to social media and celebrity culture. His way of blending art, fame, and business predicted much of what defines the modern world. Instagram influencers, reality TV stars, and even viral memes carry echoes of Warhol's philosophy that in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Yet, beyond the colorful pop art and sharp predictions, Warhol remains an enigma. He taught the world to see beauty in soup cans and celebrity photos. But he also showed how fragile and lonely fame can be. His hidden fears, his blacked-out sketchbook page, and his silence about personal struggles remind us that even icons have shadows. Warhol lived in a world of bright colors and endless attention, but his truest self may have been found in the quiet lines of a sketchbook that only he fully understood, and maybe that's what he wanted. To remind us that no matter how much we think we know someone, there's always a part of them that remains untouchable.